There's a cry in the heart of every human being, a longing that cannot be silenced by fame, wealth, or success. It is the longing for connection. From the beginning of time, God crafted humanity not only for relationship with himself, but also for meaningful connection with one another. But somewhere along the way, relationships became distorted, misused, and misunderstood. Today, we go back to the blueprint, God's original design for relationships, a divine pattern that, when followed, brings wholeness, clarity, and purpose. When God created the universe, he declared everything good. Light was good, the land and sea were good, the stars, the animals, the trees, good. But when he looked at Adam alone, something divine stirred. God said, "It is not good for man to be alone." Genesis 2:18. This wasn't loneliness speaking. It was purpose calling. God didn't react to Adam's emotions. He responded to his divine plan. This truth redefines how we view relationships. Many believe that God sends someone because you're hurting or because you're tired of being alone. But relationships were never designed to be a rescue mission for broken souls. They were created as a strategic extension of assignment. Adam wasn't wandering aimlessly. He was fulfilling a divine task, managing the garden, naming animals, walking with God. He was immersed in identity and purpose. Eve wasn't an interruption. She was an enhancement. Her arrival was not to patch up loneliness, but to multiply effectiveness. She was created as a helper suitable, not a therapist, not a crutch, not a placeholder. Modern relationships often get this backward. People go into dating or marriage hoping someone will fix their brokenness or validate their worth. But when two incomplete people join together looking for healing in each other, the result is often disappointment and dysfunction. Real wholeness begins with knowing who you are and why you exist. A woman who knows her calling doesn't fall for flattery. A man who knows his assignment won't waste time in relationships that dilute his destiny. Take the story of Sarah, a woman who had been through heartbreak and loss. For years, she chased relationships out of fear of being alone. Nothing lasted. Each relationship ended with more pain. One day, she stepped back and asked, "What does God want from my life?" She began focusing on her talents, mentoring young girls, starting a business. She became so aligned with purpose that she no longer needed someone to complete her. She was already whole. And it was in that space that she met her husband, not to rescue her, but to run beside her. That's what purpose does. It attracts what complements you, not what compensates for you. God's original design makes relationships a continuation of his work, not a cure for our wounds. When purpose is the foundation, love becomes a mission, not a mistake. Before Adam ever met Eve, he met God. Before he ever touched flesh, he was filled with breath. And before he ever loved a woman, he walked in identity. This is no small detail. It is the blueprint. God gave Adam a clear sense of self. He named him, spoke to him, gave him dominion, work, responsibility, and wisdom. Adam wasn't confused. He didn't need Eve to tell him who he was. He already knew. So when he saw her, he recognized her. "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Genesis 2:23. He identified her because he was already secure in himself. Identity is not optional in relationships. It is essential. Without identity, intimacy becomes dangerous. You begin to define yourself by the opinions, mood swings, or attention of another person. One day you feel valuable, the next worthless. You become a mirror reflecting someone else's image, rather than a light shining from your own. This is why so many fall into cycles of jealousy, control, and fear. Insecurity is not a relationship issue, it's an identity issue. A man who doesn't know he's enough will work himself to death trying to prove his worth. A woman who doesn't know her beauty will fall for the first person who notices her, even if they are toxic. Imagine trying to build a house on moving sand. That's what happens when people pursue intimacy before discovering identity. The foundation shifts every time the wind blows, but when you know who you are, when your confidence is rooted in the Creator, not the created, you bring stability into every connection. Consider David, a young professional who always tried to please his partners. He changed his personality, interests, even career choices just to keep someone around. One day, after another breakup, he finally confronted the truth. He didn't like himself. That realization pushed him into therapy, prayer, and purpose. 2 years later, he met a woman, but this time he didn't shrink or perform. He stood tall, and she loved him for who he was, not who he pretended to be. God's design is clear. He doesn't want us searching for our identity in another person's embrace. He wants us to meet him first. Intimacy without identity always ends in brokenness. But when two people walk in the clarity of who they are, they don't lose themselves in love. They find deeper strength in it. Knowing yourself is not arrogance, it's preparation. The more secure you are, the more peace you bring into the relationship. You won't compete, compare, or cling. You'll simply connect, with honor, not dependency. God's intention for relationship was never to hide who we are. It was to reveal it. In the garden, Adam and Eve were both naked and felt no shame. Genesis 2:25. Their relationship exposed them to each other, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. This is not just about vulnerability. This is about truth. In God's original design, relationships are mirrors that reflect who we truly are, not masks that hide our brokenness. When two people come together, their connection should reveal character, not conceal flaws. But in modern relationships, masks are everywhere. People show up pretending, projecting what they think the other person wants to see. They put on confidence to hide insecurity. They put on agreement to avoid conflict. But masks may attract attention. They will never sustain connection. The danger is that you can spend years being loved for a version of yourself that isn't even real. And when the mask slips, what was built on illusion crumbles. Transparency isn't weakness. It's the foundation of trust. You cannot love someone you don't truly know, and you cannot be fully loved unless you are fully seen. There's a powerful example in a couple who were married for over 20 years. Everyone admired them. They looked perfect on the outside, but in private, the wife admitted she had never once been able to express disagreement. She feared rejection. He had unknowingly created a space where honesty felt dangerous. When they finally began therapy, their love had to be rebuilt, this time not on performance, but on truth. God never intended for relationships to be safe places to pretend. He intended them to be sanctuaries of honesty, where a man can admit his fears without being belittled, where a woman can share her dreams without being dismissed, where conflict leads to clarity, not silence. A mirror doesn't lie. It reveals spots that need washing, hair that needs brushing, clothes that need adjusting. And that's what healthy relationships do. They lovingly show us our blind spots, not to shame us, but to shape us. God uses people to refine us, to sharpen us, to humble us. But if we're too afraid to be seen, we miss the growth He designed to come through connection. Relationships built on authenticity create emotional safety. You don't have to pretend to be strong. You don't have to hide your history. You can be loved as you are, not as you perform. That kind of love heals. That kind of love transforms. When God created Eve, He didn't take her from Adam's head to rule him, nor from his feet to be trampled on, but from his side near his heart to walk with him. Genesis 2:22. This detail matters. God was revealing the blueprint. Relationships were meant to be partnerships, not positions of control. Partnership implies shared vision, equal value, and mutual contribution. Possession implies ownership, dominance, and control. God's design is not for one person to lead while the other follows blindly, but for two individuals to walk together, both carrying vision, both bringing strength, both having voice. Many relationships break down not because of lack of love, but because of imbalance in power. One partner becomes the dictator while the other becomes invisible. This is not love, it's bondage. In true partnership, your voice matters, your presence carries weight, your dreams are not shelved, they are supported. A woman once shared how she had been in a marriage for 10 years where every decision, from finances to friendships, was dictated by her husband. She wasn't allowed to think, only to obey. From the outside, it looked orderly, but inside, her soul was shrinking. She lost her identity in the name of submission. When she finally found the courage to speak up, she realized what she had been in was not a marriage. It was a prison. Submission in God's design is never one-sided. Ephesians 5:21 says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." That means both parties yield, both serve, both sacrifice. One doesn't rule while the other remains silent. One doesn't shine while the other fades. True partnership allows both individuals to thrive. In business, no healthy organization runs well when one partner silences the other. The same applies to marriage, friendship, ministry, or any God-centered connection. If your relationship does not allow space for feedback, disagreement, or correction, it is out of alignment with God's design. Even Jesus, though Lord of all, called his disciples friends. He washed their feet. He listened to their doubts. That's the model. Greatness in relationships is expressed through servanthood, not superiority. There's a powerful shift that happens when relationships move from control to collaboration. You stop competing and start completing. You don't fight for dominance. You fight together for destiny. That shift creates peace, unity, and strength. No one is born to be possessed. People are born to be partnered. If someone cannot walk beside you, they have no business walking with you. And if you have to lower yourself to keep them, it is not partnership. It is slavery disguised as romance. God is a God of order, not impulse. When he formed Adam, he gave him a garden to cultivate, a command to follow, and a role to fulfill, before introducing him to love. The emotional connection came after the foundational structure was in place. This is a divine pattern. Feelings were never designed to lead. They were designed to follow purpose. In our culture today, relationships often begin in reverse. Two people feel something. So they rush into connection, partnership, even marriage, without stopping to ask the foundational questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What has God called me to build? Is this person aligned with that assignment? When you elevate feelings above foundation, the structure is always unstable. Love without preparation is like planting a seed in the sand. It may sprout, but it cannot survive. Adam was not just waiting idly for Eve. He was working, building, naming, managing. He was walking in his assignment. God didn't give him a partner to help him find purpose. He gave him a partner because he was already fulfilling it. That distinction is everything. If you don't know what you're building, how will you know who should help you build it? A young man once told his mentor that he had fallen in love with a woman after 3 dates. When asked what she stood for, what her vision was, what her values were, he couldn't answer. His heart was engaged, but his mind was disengaged. That's a recipe for heartbreak. Emotion may spark the connection, but it is purpose that sustains it. Buildings don't fall because of storms. They fall because of weak foundations. A relationship not built on vision, communication, values, and shared faith will always be vulnerable to time, temptation, and trials. Love can be real, but still not be right. That's why foundation matters more than feeling. People often mistake compatibility in hobbies, attraction, or humor for long-term alignment. But when crisis hits, those surface-level similarities don't hold weight. A couple who builds their relationship on shared convictions, prayer, service, integrity, mutual respect, can endure seasons of drought. Why? Because their connection was never based on temporary emotions, but eternal truths. There's a difference between a spark and a structure. Sparks are instant, dramatic, exciting, but fleeting. Structures are slow, methodical, solid, but lasting. Don't confuse intensity for destiny. Passion can set a fire, but only purpose keeps it burning. When a relationship is rooted in a solid foundation, you'll find peace even when emotions fluctuate. Feelings may fade and return, but the structure stands firm, and that's where love grows best, not in the chaos of impulse, but in the safety of preparation. When God placed Adam and Eve in the garden, he gave them tremendous freedom. You may freely eat of every tree, but also one boundary. Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Genesis 2:16-17. That single boundary was not about restriction, it was about protection. Boundaries are not barriers to joy, they are guards for destiny. Many people resist boundaries in relationships. They see them as rules that rob them of love's freedom. But love without limits quickly turns into dysfunction. Boundaries define where one person ends and the other begins. They protect your heart, your values, your energy, and your future. In God's design, boundaries are not a sign of fear. They are a sign of wisdom. A person who has no boundaries in relationships is like a city with broken down walls, vulnerable to attack, manipulation, and emotional theft. You must teach people how to treat you, not through lectures, but through the limits you enforce. A woman once shared how she used to say yes to every demand from her partner, canceling commitments, giving money, enduring verbal abuse, just to keep him happy. She thought it was love, but what she called love was actually fear. When she started creating boundaries, refusing manipulation, demanding respect, valuing her time, she didn't lose love. She found self-worth. Boundaries are not about building walls to keep people out. They're about building gates to allow in only what aligns with God's will. You were not created to be available to everything and everyone. You were created to steward your soul. Saying no is not unloving. It's often the most loving thing you can do for yourself and the other person. Even Jesus set boundaries. He withdrew from crowds. He rested. He said no. He chose his inner circle carefully. He never allowed others to define his mission. That is what mature love looks like. It's not just passion, it's protection. In romantic relationships, boundaries around physical intimacy, time, communication, and personal space are vital. Without them, emotions override discernment, and flesh overrides wisdom. God's command in the garden was not to steal joy, but to preserve intimacy with him. Crossing that line introduced shame, blame, and separation. When people respect your boundaries, it reveals the depth of their character. A partner who pressures you to compromise your values is not honoring God's design. Real love doesn't push past your no. It cherishes it. It recognizes that the God in you is more important than the pleasure of the moment. Healthy boundaries lead to healthy love. They foster mutual respect, emotional safety, and spiritual clarity. They separate manipulation from commitment, and they allow relationships to grow within the soil of trust, not fear. Even in the perfection of Eden, conflict found a way in. The first human relationship faced its greatest test not because love was absent, but because temptation revealed what was hidden beneath the surface. Adam blamed, Eve defended, trust cracked. That scene teaches an eternal truth. Conflict is not a sign of failure, it's a signal for growth. Every relationship will be tested. Disagreements, misunderstandings, and frustrations are unavoidable. Two different people with different minds, pasts, and perspectives, trying to walk as one will always encounter friction. That friction isn't the enemy. The danger lies in how it's handled. God never said you wouldn't argue. He just gave you a way to respond that protects unity. Conflict becomes destructive when ego replaces humility, when the goal shifts from understanding to winning, when silence becomes punishment, or when truth is weaponized rather than shared in love. But when conflict is approached through kingdom principles, patience, forgiveness, honesty, and listening, it becomes the doorway to deeper trust. Think of gold. It only reaches purity through fire. Heat exposes impurities, so does conflict, not to shame, but to refine. A man who avoids every disagreement avoids growth. A woman who buries her voice to keep peace builds resentment. God designed relationships not to be free of pain, but to be places where healing happens through truth. A real-world example comes from a couple who were business partners and spouses. They often clashed over leadership styles. Their communication turned into blame and tension escalated. After weeks of prayer and coaching, they chose to sit, listen, and write down how each person felt, without interrupting. That one shift transformed the dynamic. Conflict didn't disappear, but it became productive instead of destructive. Many people were raised to believe conflict means the relationship is broken. But silence can be more damaging than an argument. A conflict addressed is a wound cleaned. A conflict ignored is a wound infected. God doesn't avoid hard conversations with his people. He engages with grace and truth. Relationships require the same. Learning to fight fair is one of the most spiritual things you can do. Tone matters, timing matters, intent matters. You can disagree without dishonoring. You can confront without crushing. True maturity is seen not in the absence of conflict, but in how you walk through it. The presence of conflict doesn't signal the absence of love. It reveals the opportunity for greater intimacy. When handled with wisdom, conflict creates stronger roots. It's not what you go through that defines the relationship. It's how you choose to grow through it. In Eden, the design was never just Adam and Eve. It was Adam, Eve, and God, the divine triangle. God was not a guest in their relationship. He was the center. That's the structure heaven intended. Human connection anchored in divine presence. When God is removed from the center, relationships may still function, but they will never flourish. Everything God creates points back to him. Marriage, friendship, family, all are reflections of his nature. Love isn't just an emotion. It's a divine attribute. So when you enter a relationship that continually distracts you from prayer, weakens your faith, or pulls you from purpose, it's not in alignment with God's design. A godly relationship awakens your spirit, not just your emotions. There's a difference between chemistry and covenant. Chemistry might excite you, but covenant will establish you, and covenant is birthed through God's Spirit. Two people aligned with heaven will constantly encourage each other toward the throne. They pray together, they fast together, they worship side by side. Their love is not just romantic. It's spiritual warfare against the enemy's agenda for their lives. One young woman testified how her life changed after leaving a relationship that felt good, but was spiritually draining. Her boyfriend had no desire for God, no conviction, no spiritual goals. She tried to balance the two worlds, church and compromise, but it left her empty. When she finally surrendered the relationship and focused on God, her clarity returned. Years later, she married a man who didn't just attend church, but carried the heart of a worshipper. Now they serve in ministry together. Their relationship didn't just make them happy, it made them holy. The purpose of love is not to replace your relationship with God, but to reflect it. If someone draws you away from your convictions to keep their affection, what they're offering is not love, it's idolatry. God never gives you someone who competes with him. He gives you someone who complements his calling in your life. A relationship rooted in God is not perfect, but it is powerful. When you pray together, demons tremble. When you serve together, strongholds break. When you love with God's love, forgiveness flows easily, offense doesn't linger, and purpose is fulfilled. This doesn't only apply to romantic relationships. Friendships, mentors, business partners. Every connection should carry spiritual resonance. The people closest to you should make you more sensitive to the Holy Spirit, not less. If the presence of God becomes rare in your relationship, chaos becomes normal. But when he is invited, honored, and obeyed, everything flourishes. He blesses what mirrors his nature. When two or more gather in his name, he's not a spectator, he's an active participant.